Yes, I did run against John Cornyn, and for those of you who didn't see the statistics, everybody, if I came and talked to, hey, how are you doing, John? You probably heard me introduce myself as just a nobody, just a regular Texan, no different than anybody else. Well, this nobody pulled almost 11% of the state of Texas on $70,000. Amen. Pretty proud of that. I think we had a real serious run at it, but it's hard to get people to release their money to somebody they've never heard of before. It's hard to get them to know who you are if you don't have any money. So it's a vicious cycle. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight is two things. The first one, which is the longer part of the program, is federalism, the basic premise of the Constitution. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into nationalism. If you don't know what that is, you will know tonight. It's going to tug on most of us the way we think about our relationship with the federal government and the state of Texas, and what we think about just about everything under the sun and who's ruling on it. We're going to talk about this a little bit. And I'm going to make you have to rethink how you view a lot of things, especially social issues. The second part is not as long as the first part, but it has to do with the fact that for the last 2 months of the campaign, I had a private investigator working on my behalf and a couple of investigative journalists working on my behalf as well. And what I learned as a layman, non-political, non-federally elite connected beltway type was how insidious the federal game is in politics. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that I learned and a couple of examples that are prevalent throughout the federal campaign. So before I get into the basis of this thing, I want to ask a question. How many people in here, show of hands, are ready for the Supreme Court to rule and step in the middle of marriage and say it's between one man and one woman and get it over with? Yeah. A little over half. Okay, y'all are going to be very happy tonight. But bear with me. By the end of the little program, hopefully you'll have a grasp of where I'm coming from. It is Keep Texas Free. We started this in January. It's Keep Texas Free LLC. It is not a C4 either. It's for profit, but it's never going to make a profit, so I'm not worried about paying any taxes on it. At the end of this, I will be asking if you got any spare change to donate it, because I'm traveling around the state, and we're going to have to raise about $40,000 just to cover the cost of getting around. This is our t-shirt. I love the Gadsden flag. I really do. I've got all kinds of Gadsden things. I've got all the come and take it's. I've got Don't Tread on Me, everything. But the fact of the matter is that Don't Tread on Me is a little bit passé, because for over a century they've had their boot on our neck. So really it should say, they've got a boot on your neck, would you mind taking it off, please? That's where we're at. Simple question, what's more powerful, the state government or the federal government? Who's supposed to be the most powerful?
States.
Good answer. States. Nobody believes that today, right? Are we on the right track? These are the chorus questions. This is for the choir. Everybody gets it. No, we're not on the right track. If you feel like we're in decline, it's because we are. You're not fooling yourself. We all feel the same thing. But why is that? Who's got a guess? Why are we off the track? You can say we get away from God. That's fine. That's fine. I'm telling you, we all know that's happening.
Keep re-electing the same idiots.
Keep re-electing the same idiots?
Yep.
Good answer.
Lack of term limits.
Lack of term limits. Go ahead, Teresa.
Because the federal government has overstepped its bounds.
Or the wrong idiots.
I'm going to tell you.
Apathy.
What do you got?
Well, I think everybody has the idea life should be fair.
That actually kind of gets into what I'm going to get into. A little bit. I am not an academic. I'm not a scholar. I'm a guy that around 40 years old decided to take up the Constitution, the framers, the founders, the state ratification debates, and figure out exactly what that piece of parchment meant, because no one was giving me a clear answer. You take this, if you understand this concept, you understand about 90% more than any representative individual in the Congress. That U.S. Constitution was based in three principles: federalism, republicanism, and limited government. I have federalism highlighted in dark because that is the most important aspect. Limited government. Everybody understands you can interchange limited government with liberty. Interchangeable. Why is that? Because the smaller our government is, the freer the people are. There's never been a government in history that got so big that the people were so much more free. It doesn't work that way. Larger government gets, the more it oppresses its people, the more your liberties are stripped. Republicanism, that's a simple formula. The concept of republicanism is you will be represented by those you elect. And it's a simple concept. And it goes hand in hand. Everybody in here has read their Constitution? I'm going to test you on it. All right. Everybody read the little caveat in there that has the 30,000 citizens per representative? Right? The old original formula that came out of the ratification. Okay, well, the reason for that was very specific. If you lived in a community of 30 or 40,000 people, there's a pretty high likelihood that you would either know the person you were voting for, or you would know someone that knows that person, and you'd have something we do not have today: context of character. You'd actually kind of have an idea what kind of person they were. What do we have today? A little over 720,000 of us to one representative. What do you know about them? You know exactly what they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on to market to you, to tell you that they are conservative just like you. Are they? Nobody goes to church with them. Nobody sees them at Walmart. Nobody sees them anywhere. You don't press the flesh with them. You don't break bread with them. You don't know anything about them. What you know is nothing. You see a picture on TV. That's all you get. That's been shot out of the water as well. But out of those three, federalism is the key. Now I'm going to tell you this is my perspective, and everybody can take this any direction you want to go with it. Federalism is the answer to every single problem we have today. All of them. Except for fiscal issues. It can correct the fiscal ideology, but it can't correct the debt we created over the last 80 years. It can't do it. That will correct itself, sooner or later. There's no silver bullet for that kind of debt. Federalism is the foundation of the Constitution, but what is it? Federalism is a simple concept. That's the concept that the states would have expansive, unlimited powers. Outside of those limited, delegated, enumerated powers that the federal government was given by the states, they're going to have everything else. So they're supposed to be the most powerful bodies here. The federal government was never intended to be involved in the affairs of the states beyond those enumerated authorities that the federal government was authorized. They're not supposed to be involved in everything that's going on in the state. They're very fixated on what they're supposed to be involved in. 10th Amendment. Now, I have a daughter who just graduated from the University of Alabama. Don't throw anything at me. We don't know anybody in Alabama. I don't know how that happened. I think she was throwing darts or saw a national championship one or something and decided it'd be a good idea. She's about to go to law school. I don't know what I did there in that either, but she took an LSAT. She was talking to some professors she's going to be working with. This is what they call the Invisible Amendment. 10th Amendment. This is federalism explained. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, or reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. There's something I want everybody to understand that most people don't really get. Or to the people is no different than the states. It's grouping. To the states respectively, or to the people. Inside the border of a state, which are supposed to be what? Free and independent states. Capital S. Very important. That capital S means a lot to me. If you live inside the borders of Texas, you're a Texan. If you live inside the borders of Texans, you make up Texas. As people, we are Texas. There's not two different things going on here. This is Federalist 45. Came out during the state ratification debates. This is when they were trying to pass the Constitution. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which remain with the state governments are numerous and indefinite. I want you to understand something. Everybody loves James Madison, but most people don't really realize that even though he's referred to as the father of the Constitution, he was a big government guy. Almost everything he proposed in Philadelphia got shot down. He was a Hamiltonian. But he was an honorable guy, an honorable man. When they sold it off to be a limited federal republic, he sold it that way. And that's what he carried back. He was one of those who had honor. Federalism is history. It does not exist anymore. We don't have a shred of it. Not a shred. What we have is an unconstitutional government based in nationalism, capital N, a nation, capital N, with unlimited powers. Anybody in here got an example of how the Constitution restrains or restricts or limits the federal government in any serious way ever? I'll argue that that national government we have can do anything it wants, anytime it wants, any day it wants. There's not a thing we can do about it. Do you agree?
That's a practical matter.
I don't want everybody to have Prozac and get all depressed and everything. We're going to work on this a little bit. When I say we've been nationalized, understand that the opposite of federalism, where all the power is dispersed to the states and they have expansive rights, the opposite of that is when everything is driven to the center. And all the power is with an elite, finite few. Nationalism, when all power is held by the central government, with the states being utilized as subordinate administrators. That's a Hamiltonian viewpoint. That's exactly what someone like Alexander Hamilton wanted. They wanted the federal government to have the power to veto all state laws that they didn't like. He wanted all this massive power shift to the central. That's what was not supposed to happen, and that's what the Constitution was supposed to protect against. Now, you're going to laugh at these, but I want you to think about this very hard. And if you've never had this asked of you before, ask your neighbors about it. Do we live in the United States of America in the free and independent state of Texas? No. Or do we live in the United State of America in the county of Texas? You laugh.
That's what it is.
Do we manage our own affairs?
No.
No. Do we budget our own money? No. The 82nd legislature, of which we have final numbers on, we took in somewhere around $82 billion in revenue. That's what each of us paid into. Does anybody know what we spent in Texas that year? That by year? Around 190 plus. Where's that other money come from? Well, it sort of comes out of our pocket, and politicians are all going to say, well, that's our money and we want it back. And we're going to go, no, that's not our money because you let them take it from us the first time. Once it leaves our pocket, it's not ours anymore. Then you get into that, they dangle that money back to the state legislature and they say, here, we've got this for you, but you can't feed your children fried chicken at school. You're going to have this water pressure at your shower head. You're going to drive this speed. Oh, you're going to call pornography art. Oh, and wait a minute. You can have abortion as a choice of birth control. That's where we're at today. We've been nationalized. How did it happen? I lay it specifically at the feet of the judiciary.
Thank you.
Okay?
5 people.
No other. Thomas Jefferson wrote this after it was implemented for a few years. This was his review of the Constitution. By the way, he wasn't in Philadelphia. He wasn't there for the Bill of Rights of the First Congress. This is his review. The Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape into any form they please. That man had issues in some areas, but he was brilliant in foreseeing what that paper was going to do.
Did John Roberts write that?
There are 3 aspects of the judiciary throughout the last century that have been the major causes of our decline. Commerce Clause is one of them. Okay, everybody understands the Commerce Clause?
No.
The premise of the Commerce Clause was to keep, for the federal government to have the authority to help keep commerce between the states regular. Regular. It never was intended to allow them to regulate commerce inside your state. Ever. but they regulate every aspect of economic activity everywhere now. That's the first one, and that's not the worst one. Everybody understands the 17th Amendment? 17th Amendment, 1913. The states back there in Philadelphia when they were creating the Constitution, people like George Mason said, hey, wait a minute. The states are going to have the power, and if the states are allowing these few authorities, and we're creating this new government that's got these 3 branches of government, we're giving them checks and balances between each other. The states, who are the all-powerful, who are giving these authorities, or granting these authorities, they deserve a check as well. So they created a bicameral Congress with a lower house, the People's House, we all know that, and the upper house, which is the Senate, which is supposed to be the check for the states. The state legislatures had the power to appoint their U.S. senators. The whole idea was that if the new government started behaving tyrannically or unconstitutionally or, you know, maybe reading your email or listening to your phone calls or whatever, they could tell their U.S. senators to put a wrench in the whole program. Well, in 1913, they passed the 17th Amendment. They become popularly elected, and the state check on the federal government goes away, and we're marched into nationalism almost overnight. We have no check. There is no check available to the states right now. The federal government does what it wants when it wants, and we don't have any way of really stopping it because basically all of our state representatives agree. They support nationalism. They'll tell you they're all for the 10th Amendment. Put them in front of me for 5 minutes and watch what happens. They don't get it. This is the worst one of all. Has anybody ever heard of the incorporation doctrine? Now we're going to get somewhere. Okay, look, the incorporation doctrine, everybody understands what the progressive era of the last century has been, right? Where these judiciaries are basically overtaken by progressive, liberal, Marxist, whatever you want to call them. Throw your name at them, I'm good with it. This is a 20th century concept created by our Supreme Court in 1925. What it did was, they took the 14th Amendment. For those that don't know, the 14th Amendment was passed in 1867 to constitutionalize the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which gave newly freed slaves rights of citizenship. They took the 14th Amendment in 1925 and they said that the 14th Amendment gave them the authority to incorporate the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. Doesn't mean anything to you right now, but in 10 minutes you'll get it. The incorporation doctrine is the single most abominable tool used by the federal government and their army, which is the 9 judges. I had a friend of mine who's a scholar who said that our Supreme Court is to the President of the United States what the Egyptian army is to the new Egyptian dictator. They just don't have guns, but they wield the same power. This incorporation doctrine, write it down if you want to. Go home and Google it, read about it, whatever you want. You can find it. But it's one unheard of. People don't see it on the news. People don't talk about it. But you'll know more than most of it. You'll know more than your attorneys do half the time. Do we have any lawyers here? If I say anything out loud, jump up there and say it. If you got a question,
More than happy to do that.
thank you.
So far, you're just being entirely too polite.
Oh, really? Well, here's the deal. Incorporation doctrine was a creation out of thin air. And if you go back, and I've gone back and read the debates over the 14th Amendment and all these different aspects, my own lawyer will argue with me all day long over the application of incorporation. And he says it's absolutely justified. The problem is he can't do anything but quote Supreme Court justices. He can't go back and talk about the debates of the 14th Amendment and how it got there.
Have you
And
thought
what
about
they said.
changing lawyers?
He's actually very good. And actually, he's my own project. I'm just trying to swing it. Here's a big question for you. Do you believe that the Federal Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights in the Federal Constitution protects you from the federal government? It's not a trick question. It does. Supposed to. Do you believe the Bill of Rights in the Federal Constitution protects you from your state government? It shouldn't. Back to reading your pamphlet, reading your pocket constitution. Everybody read the Bill of Rights. Have you read the legal description of that document, which is the preamble? The statement that the first Congress put out. They didn't mince words. I'm telling you, to support the Constitution, federalism, republicanism, and limited government, you got to reject the idea that the Federal Bill of Rights applies to your state. It just doesn't. It absolutely does not. And I don't care how many academics you put in front of me, they cannot prove what's on those source documents wrong. They can tell you what Supreme Court justices have said to the contrary, but they can't tell you that that's what they meant when they passed the 14th Amendment. These are real basic issues with incorporation. The whole concept. The fact that it centralizes all government power, that it obliterates state sovereignty, and that it made we the people subject to the whims of a few elites and their friends. There's historical relevance to that. When you are being managed by an elite few in a town far, far away, take yourself back about 240 years. Think about what was going on here in this country when we were being led by an elite few in a town across the sea. At least we had a pond between us. We can't skip over a pond now. Framers of the Constitution met in 1787. They had 17 delegates appointed. Only 55 attended. 39 actually signed off on the agreed to Constitution. 8 of which, who did not sign, said there wasn't any way in hell they were signing that document, that government was too strong. But even people like Patrick Henry, if it passes, we'll take it through the process of the state debates, the ratification debates. And if it so much as passes, we'll do this for you only on the charge that the first order of business for the first Congress would be to put further constraints on it. Honorable men. They went back and they fought against it. People like Patrick Henry and George Mason, they fought against it, but it passed, barely. First Congress followed through with further constraints by ratifying the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, or the Bill of Rights. That is a restriction only on the federal government. If you read the preamble, you understand that in 1789, when the first Congress met, they said the convention of a number of states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. Very important. Its powers. Not their own, the new government. That further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. This last part's good because you have to understand the mindset. These states were full of people who were very nervous about creating another government that might rule over them. Very nervous. The arguments were high, the level was high, but they were very worried about it. And as extending the grounds of public confidence in the government will best ensure the benefits and ends of its institution. Its institution. The new government, not their own. When you see the First Amendment and it says no establishment of a religion, did you think states like Massachusetts and Connecticut, who by the way had state religion and charged tax for it, like Puritanism in Connecticut, do you think they signed away their right to have Puritanism in Connecticut? No. This was that's the reason it starts out with Congress shall make no law and it ends with the 10th Amendment saying everything else belongs to the states. This is the part that started me on Keep Texas Free. This part I could not grasp. The Supreme Court upheld the Bill of Rights exactly as they had written the preamble for over 135 years. The Supreme Court. So this is what I have learned, and this is another thing my attorney gets crazy with. When you hear people talk about case precedent, oh, well, that's been tried before, 40 years ago, they did X, Y, and Z, they're going to stick to this, that's the way they're going to go. Well, this is a layman's viewpoint. I think case precedent basically stops around 1910. For some reason, we were just unwilling to go back and really open the sourcing up to the Supreme Court rulings that were closest to the creation of the document. Unnerves me. We listened to Hugo Black, who's a 1947 ruling that stuck us with this whole separation of church and state thing out of thin air. These are all modern time rulings, but they don't go back and see what the original design was, what they said then. Now, You're going to feel like you're kind of you're going to really go to sleep on me. You're going to feel like this is law school, but trust me, this is like, y'all remember Tim Conway, Dorf on golf and all that stuff, and he was on his knees in the little shoes? This is kind of like Dorf on law. I'm going to run you through this just to give you a highlight. I want to show you the trend of the way the Supreme Court ruled over the years. This is before the 14th Amendment. This is Barron v. Baltimore. The storyline behind this was Barron was a business owner on the wharf there in Baltimore. The city of Baltimore and the mayor had decided they were going to divert drainage from road projects in Baltimore to the wharf. It silted in around the wharf. It stopped the vessels that were able to come into his dock from being able to get in. He sued. He got a $4,500 judgment. The appellate court flipped it over. They carried it into the Supreme Court, and he was using the Fifth Amendment for not having your property taken from you by the government without just compensation. Problem is, Fifth Amendment's in the Federal Bill of Rights. Whatever they do in Baltimore is whatever they do in Baltimore. I mean, the federal judiciary got a hold of this, and this is what they said. Let's say that. This is a little excerpt from what this Justice John Marshall, and by the way, Justice John Marshall was no friend of state sovereignty, but he got it right. The Constitution was ordained and established by the people of the United States for themselves, for their own government, and not for the government of the individual states. That's how they left it. They said, this doesn't apply to them. This is for the federal government, not the states. How do I move that thing to the straight?
You can.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Now, the 14th Amendment is the whole issue behind everything. It's like the tool that they used, the little cloak and dagger. They used the 14th Amendment as a way to kind of reach out there and take power that they didn't have. This is the first, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment is the big deal. The whole idea that all persons born or naturalized in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. By the way, everybody understand what anchor babies are, right? Right. How long has anchor baby status been around?
Since the slaves. Wasn't it?
When I say the date, you're going to fall out. 1982.
Whoa.
I was 17 years old.
Who was president then?
Plyler v. Doe. Plyler v. Doe. It's a Texas lawsuit. Basically, all really bad lawsuits kind of come out of Texas. It's really strange that way. James Plyler, school superintendent up in Tyler. The Supreme Court was trying to force us to educate illegal aliens. They said we can't afford it. They said if you're going to force us to do it, we're going to charge them $800 or $900 a head to bring them in here to offset our costs. Went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, oh, no. All persons born or naturalized are citizens, born. They took a big, broad swath at it and said, no, if you're born here, you're a citizen, therefore you have to pay for it. It has to be a free public education. I can almost quote that rule in effect. It says they could not, there's no discernible difference between those who came here illegally and those who came here legally. Except one's illegal. Right? Pretty clear difference to me, but they're the Supreme Court. And we are all trained, raised, and indoctrinated that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of everything all the time, everywhere. And that's a bald-faced lie. If it's not pursuant to those limited authorities in the federal Constitution, it's none of their business. We have a Supreme Court in Texas that can handle it. This whole section, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities. Big statement. Big statement. They use that a lot. Of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. Second key statement. The issue here is that if you read the debates of the 14th Amendment, which the 14th Amendment was very shadowy, it was ratified under really sketchy circumstances, but we're not going to get into that. If you go back and read the discussions between both parties, Republican and Democrat, they all basically say the same thing. What they agreed to. They agreed that they were constitutionalizing the Civil Rights Act of 1866. What that means is, everybody's heard the term, one Congress can't bind the hands of a future Congress. Well, if you pass an act, just a simple act, and the Congress slips hands in the next go-around or 10 years from now, they can all come back and repeal that act. But you make it much harder on them to alter anything if you amend the Constitution and you put it in the Constitution. So they were afraid at the time, fresh off the Civil War, that the South, growing in popularity and population, would overtake the Congress soon enough, and that they might repeal the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and they'd go back into slavery action. Well, I understand the concept, but if you read the Civil Rights Act, the privileges and immunities are explained, and the due process is also explained, and they're very simple. They didn't give extra benefits of citizenship to anybody. They basically reaffirmed basic citizens' rights. Ability to enter into contracts, ability to purchase property, all these really fundamental ideas that we don't think anything about, but they had to think about that for newly freed slaves. Due process, access to the courts, ability to represent yourself, ability to face your accuser, all these basic, lawful rights of citizenship. It didn't create extra abundant laws, and they did not agree to allow the federal government to apply whatever it so wished to the states. It conveyed no power whatsoever to the federal government to apply the Federal Bill of Rights to the states. Now I'm going to explain this to you. This is 1873. This is after the 14th Amendment. I'm going to give you this for a reference because this is a Supreme Court case where they took in the Bill of Rights and they ruled after it was passed with the 14th Amendment, after the 14th Amendment was passed. Slaughterhouse cases, real simple layman's terms. New Orleans had a lot of processing plants and butchers that worked upstream of New Orleans. New Orleans at the time had a really high rate of every kind of sickness you could think of because they had an issue with animal carcasses and everything else coming down the river and getting into the waterways around the city of New Orleans. So they decided the way to fix it was they took it up to the state legislature. Well, they came down and the way they did it was they took a piece of property on the south side, downstream, and they said, hey, all of you, you must do business in this one location. And the butchers got together and sued. That's what turned into the slaughterhouse cases. This is the way they read. They tried to use part of the Federal Bill of Rights to protect themselves. This is the excerpt from their case. The effect is to fetter and degrade the state governments by subjecting them to the control of Congress in the exercise of powers heretofore universally conceded to them of the most ordinary and fundamental character. Y'all get the whole long words there? They're trying to say that the federal government has powers over things that state governments had always had power over. We are convinced that no such results were intended by the Congress which proposed these amendments or by the legislatures of the states which ratified them. That is Supreme Court Justice Miller on the majority side. They said, the state government has control over this. We were never given that power. That's after the 14th Amendment. That's their review of the Bill of Rights. And some excess of it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
This is totally off subject. It's important.
What?
DC Rock, Cantor loses primary.
Oh, wow! That's great!
I was good at downside. You stole my comment.
Oh, were you really? Okay, where was I? Okay. Y'all understand how they understood the Bill of Rights before the 14th Amendment? You understand how they understood the Bill of Rights after the 14th Amendment? Now, 50 some odd years later, okay? We've already got, see to me, we've got case precedents. We have Supreme Court justices who've already ruled, and they've ruled exactly the same way the first Congress wrote it, and exactly the same way they ruled in 1833. They've got this consistent line of thought that matches the first Congress. 1925. Of which we still have people alive, healthy, running around, who are around during this ruling. Gitlow v. New York. The short story of Gitlow v. New York is Gitlow was a socialist. He wrote paraphernalia and publications and all kinds of things that were socialist documents. He published them and he handed them out. They locked him up for it. That was New York. They locked him up for it. It worked its way into the Supreme Court in 1925. In the Supreme Court, it was free press and free speech. First Amendment, restriction on the federal government only, remember? They took it to the Supreme Court under the First Amendment. This is a Justice Sanford from 1925. Very key wording that you should never ever see in a Supreme Court ruling. For present purposes, we may and do assume that the rights and freedom of speech and freedom of the press were among the fundamental personal rights and liberties protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment from impairment by the states. They yanked that one arbitrarily right out of thin air. Created that. It has nothing to do with anything except them saying, yeah, we'll take that power. Now, I like to describe it like this. It's a Supreme Court justice who in 1925 stood up and said, you know, nobody ever really agreed to this, but we're here and we're so much smarter than you are, and we really know what they meant to say. What they really meant to say was, we can incorporate the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states, and you guys just go home. And by the way, that's how we live today, just in case you're wondering. We are all just too stupid to manage our own lives. There's an elite few that can handle our lives much better than we can. That's the agreement we have with them. Since the incorporation doctrine, we find ourselves at the Supreme Court arguing over everything. Placing the name of God, Scripture, the Ten Commandments in a public building in Texas. Even if Texans want to do it, we end up in court with people 1,000 miles away. Why is that? Incorporation. Because they can. Whether it's a crime to burn a Texas or U.S. flag. Let me explain something to y'all. I got a big smile on my face 99% of the time. You come on my property and you burn a Texas flag, I will kick your ass. One of us is going to go to jail and the other one's not going to go home. That's none of their business. By the way, a funny story about the flag burning thing. You know when they passed that law and they said, oh, no, you can burn an American flag. You can disgrace it down at your city hall. You can burn it anywhere you want. It's free speech. You know what Louisiana did? And it almost passed both houses. It passed one house. Louisiana said, okay, Supreme Court, if that's where you're going to be. They wrote legislation and said if you kick somebody's rear who's burning a flag, a Texas flag, or a Louisiana flag, or an American flag, it's not a crime. Try that out. And they debated that and it almost got passed. It went through the lower house, but that's a funny story though. All of these things are for Texans to decide. Recognizing marriage between one man and one woman. Now, some of this, I've got to start flipping it around and get you to understand what the federalism viewpoint is. The federalism viewpoint is this. Whether or not we recognize marriage between a man and a woman in Texas is the business of Texans, right? Those issues are for us to discuss with each other, and we'll come to terms with what we agree according to our traditional morals, values, and principles, right? If the people in Connecticut elect individuals to go to their state house and do so much as write laws that recognize Adam, Mary, and Steve, what business is it of ours as Texans? That's right. None. None. And you have to allow it. You have to allow those states to do whatever horrible, sinful things they want to do. You got to let them do it. Because if we want to set the pace, we want to be the salt and the light. No, I don't hear where I think we can be the salt and the light. If we want to set the example, you've got to allow those states to do that. Maintain federalism and start voicing it, get it out there, because the people in Connecticut that disagree with that need a place to go. And those of us here that may not agree with us need a place to go. There's two sides of every story. Oh, by the way, Second Amendment lovers, I'm an NRA member, a GOA member, and a CHL holder. The Second Amendment doesn't apply to the state of Texas or any other state. I know that sounds crazy. Second Amendment, it's the biggest thing at every meeting we go to in politics. Good Lord, if a man needs a vote, he stands up and says, Second Amendment, I want to protect it. You want to protect my Second Amendment, you tell the federal government to shut up and sit down and don't ever talk about guns. And if we're going to talk about guns, we'll talk about it at the state level. And by the way, in Texas, everybody understands we have a Bill of Rights. Oh, everybody grasps this. There's 50 different states with 50 different constitutions. There's 50 different Bills of Rights, plus one. Ours means every bit as much or more than the federal. As a matter of fact, it means more because it means something to us. The Federal Bill of Rights only restricts it. We have a Bill of Rights in Texas. Our Bill of Rights protects our right to have a gun, does it not? We have a right to bear arms in Texas. Everybody remember what the last caveat of that is? Bet you know it. I'll paraphrase. Texas reserves the right to legislate the wearing of those arms toward safety. You know what that tells me? That tells me if we keep electing phony conservatives, phony, made up, useless Republican wannabes that wear their red shirt with the big white R on their pocket and they vote liberal, 20 years from now, our kids and grandkids are all going to wake up one day and our Supreme Court's going to be stacked with a bunch of people in Texas who are going to go, you know, we've been thinking about it. And guns are so unsafe. Not only can you not wear them, you can't have them. By the way, anybody that's talking, anybody going to Austin this next session, we're pushing real hard to get that last caveat stripped from that part of the Bill of Rights. On the gun thing, I want you to understand where we are today. Has anybody ever heard of McDonald v. McDonald v. Chicago? I know you have.
Well, that's the gun owner that,
Yes,
wanted
older
to
black
keep it in
gentleman in
his
Chicago.
house. Yeah.
This had nothing to do with a crime. Nobody shot anybody. It was nothing like that. He had a pistol. He wanted to keep it in his home for security, for protection. The city of Chicago had banned guns. They told him you can't have a gun. It went into the Illinois judiciary. It went to the Illinois Supreme Court. What did the Illinois Supreme Court say? This is in the last 15 years, by the way. Illinois Supreme Court said, sorry, man. People of Chicago have spoken. This is what they want. Can't have a gun. So the NRA went crazy. The GOA went crazy. Every gun lobby group in the world went crazy. I was one of them. I was bent out of shape about it too at the beginning. They pushed it out into the federal judiciary, and the federal judiciary, of course they took it up. That's one thing you're never ever going to see a ruling on the Supreme Court say. They're never going to put out a ruling that says, we can't find no authority under the Constitution for us to rule in this area. They're never going to say that, ever. So what did they do? They took it up. They said, oh, wait a minute, we've got case precedent in 1925 all the way coming forward. We've already incorporated everything in the Bill of Rights just about, so we'll take the Second Amendment this time. And oh, by the way, the 14th Amendment gives us the power to incorporate the Second Amendment on the state. And oh, free and independent Illinois, you're really not all that free and independent. Sorry, your say doesn't mean anything because the Second Amendment in the Federal Bill of Rights protects that man's right to have a gun. And what did all the NRA members do? Yes. So what did we really do? What we really did was we transferred power over nationalizing our guns to 5 of 9 unelected individuals. So if a state wants to ban guns, fine. If a state wants to allow you to have tanks, that's fine too. I want one. As we have pushed all this power to the central, so that 20 years from now, or 10 years from now, or whenever they decide, because politics moves generally left, if you haven't figured that out yet. Historical cycles are true. We move left. It's a bad sign, but that's we got what we talked about earlier. Got to embrace what's going on and deal with it. That Supreme Court generally moves left. So 20 years from now, they're going to reach out there and go, you know, guns are so unsafe. We're going to pass national legislation, and it's constitutional. We're going to ban guns nationally. And our grandkids are going to go, you can't do that. They're going to say, yes, we can, because your grandparents gave us the sanction. That's the direction we're headed. There's no federalism left in the way we live today. I think it can be recovered, but until everybody understands what we're dealing with, everybody walks the street every day, and nobody talks about this. Nobody has a concept of what's going on around them, and they like it that way. This is so true, it's not even funny. Now, everybody in here that raised your hand about marriage in the Supreme Court, do not feel bad. And I'm not isolating you and trying to make fun of anybody. I want you to understand that probably 75% of everyone I speak to has that feeling. It doesn't matter who they are. Liberty groups, not so much. But I can talk about other aspects of them, and they'll agree just as much. Everybody wants to hold up that Constitution and quote Jefferson. I'm a constitutionalist. As long as you're doing it the way I think we ought to be doing it. Right? It's a tough pill to swallow. The idea that we want them to deal with marriage, guns, abortion, take your choice. This is a fact. We should be handling those issues right here in Texas according to our morals, principles, and tradition. That's what we've got to get through our head. This is the most basic premise you can have. Arguing over natural rights, social issues, all of those aspects that are outside those 18 enumerated powers, that's for Texans to talk about with Texans. Okies to talk about with Okies. Californians to do whatever it is they do in California. This is where the decline of this country is going. This is why. I firmly believe that with all my heart. I use this word because I think it's funny anymore. Free markets makes me laugh. It's a great word and it means a lot to some of us. When politicians use the term free market, unless it's maybe Rand Paul or somebody who's got an economic basis, who understands Basquiat or Rothbard or Hazlitt or any of that, generally speaking, they're just trying to say a keyword: Second Amendment, free markets, repeal Obamacare. They don't really know what they're doing, but let me tell you something. They didn't use the term free markets when the framers were creating the Constitution, but they were the original free marketeers. They knew that leaving the states to govern themselves, liberty would have the most protection. The idea was, you restrict the federal, you put the Bill of Rights on it. You allow the states to do whatever it is they want to do. Why is that? Because we're free and independent states and we're a free people, supposedly. If a state writes law that so much as oppresses you or takes away your liberty, what will you do? Leave. If we nationalize us like we've done and gone to the United States, singular, living in the county of Texas, and we pass national legislation that oppresses us, where do we go?
Costa Rica.
I think we're running on a short list of places to go myself. There are issues of scale here, and I don't get into this, but I'm just going to point out a couple of details to you. There's 316 million of us across 50 different states. We're literally managed by 546 individuals in D.C. And even more realistically, we're managed by 5 of 9 unelected individuals. If you know one thing about history, if you've read one story about any society in history, you know that that formula is a formula for disaster. Absolute disaster. There's 26 million people in the state of Texas today, plus we're probably pushing 27 million right now. For scale, understand that that's almost 10 times more people than were in all 13 colonies when they passed, 13 states when they passed and ratified and implemented the Constitution. That's almost as many people were in the United States when they fought the Civil War in the entire United States. When the framers designed the Constitution and put the 30,000 to 1 ratio between citizens and the representatives, we've overshot that 5 times in Texas already. We're out of scale compared to what they passed the U.S. Constitution at. So we have lots of things we're dealing with. We don't have time to deal with what other states are deciding to do with their people. We got to deal with what's going on in the State House in Texas. Everybody pointed to me and they said, "You're running for U.S. Senate. We need you here in Texas." Folks, you don't understand what a U.S. Senator is. They're the folks that stand in the doorway. That's the representative you want. Telling the federal government, we got it covered in Texas, thanks but no thanks. The House, that's a whole different issue. Those folks make up the body of government. If they're going to abdicate their power and they're not going to do what they're elected to do, so be it. Let them go have it. U.S. Senators, they've got to be up there saying, my state doesn't do this. My state will not accept this. They've got to be the ones who are out there taking charge. And the state representatives and state senators in the Texas House, they got to grow some backbone. And they've got to actually understand this concept. When you hear a state representative say, and we'll pass this, and if they don't like it, we'll sue them. Just laugh at them. Where do states go to lose? Supreme Court. I mean, come on. What is their job? Their job is to call everything constitutional that's completely abusive. I mean, good Lord, we're passing Patriot Acts. We got NSA bills and FISA courts. And they're saying it's perfectly fine. It is perfectly fine that I can collect every single one of your email, hear every single one of your phone calls. And I'll tell you how deep this is. I had a talk with my daughter last night, and I said, you don't understand. Facebook, who freely gives information to the federal government, do you understand that when you get on Facebook and you're on their system, as you key in something, if you key in the worst possible comment you can think of and you tell somebody how bad you hate them and then you change your mind and go, that would be a terrible thing to say, and you delete it, it's saved. You don't have to post it. That's how far along we are. If you touch an electronic device, it's documented. This is not a good pathway we're on by any stretch. Nationalism is, when you talk about the Weimar Republic or the Germans, National Socialism, folks, they loved it going into it. They loved it. They ran into it headlong, marching in step, comrade. Every single day, you look at the NSA, DHS, IRS, DOJ, EPA, DOE, throw your letters at the wall, you got them. Are any of these constitutional? No. And people walking the street today will tell you no, but they exist. How is that possible? My grandfather, God rest his soul, would tell you flat out, let me explain something about politicians. They all campaign on not spending more than they take in and not having debt, every single one of them. So why is it we have debt every single time it gets worse? They lie. If you campaign on it, but it never goes away, boy, that's a great way to get elected. Understand the backhand of this. When you give the government power over a right, you have necessarily given it what? The power to take it away. Right? Anybody with the power to give it to you has got the power to take it away from you. If you give them authority over it, you can bet your bottom dollar you're not going to have it very long, or it's going to be limited. I tell every state representative I see, you want to get a soundbite that goes national, every single time they stick a microphone in front of you, you say, unless it concerns a power delegated to it by the states, that should have a capital S. I capitalize all S's, by the way. I don't even care what the grammatical rule is. Stay out of the business of Texas. This is not about secession. This is not about us throwing up the flag and saying we're done, we're out of here. This is not about that. This is about the Declaration of Independence meant what it said. We're supposed to be free and independent states. This is not us against 49 other states. They are all in the same boat we are. This is 50 states that need to get their head out of the sand, realize where they came from, and tell this tyrannical, out-of-control government we're not going to do this anymore, and not participate. I got to speak in front of a legislator last night, and we were talking about, well, how do you deal with that? Well, it's simple. Write legislation that actually has teeth in it. And they'll say, well, you know, they do. They write this, they write that. No. You don't understand. Go Republican, go Republic on them. Write legislation. Say the TSA bill. Remember the TSA bill David Simpson brought forward? Write legislation that says we don't recognize the TSA as an authorized entity. Or abortion. Let's take something really huge. In Texas, majority of Texans do not want abortion as a choice of birth control. It's immoral. We all believe that. If you choose to murder your child, that should be a crime. Okay. If that's the case and that's the consensus we came to, then you need state legislators who write laws that say, in Texas, we're going to make it a criminal offense to use abortion as a choice of birth control. And we do not recognize, and I told him last night, put it in your language, we do not recognize incorporation doctrine. Make it loud so that it becomes public. And in that same response, that's not even the big part, at the end, put anyone caught giving aid or information or assistance to the federal government by way of litigation concerning this legislation will go to jail. Because when we're in Texas, when we say it's unconstitutional and we're not going to participate, we don't participate. And going into the federal judiciary is participating. And you will lose. Stop it at the Red River. Now, do we have state representatives that'll do that? What do you think, Teresa? I think we got a couple coming up that might bite into that. This is the very basic premise that what they do in other states is their business, and what we do here, outside those enumerated powers, which are pretty easy to get to, what other states do is their business, and what we do is our business. If we lived under federalism, when those buses rolled into Austin with glasses of feces and urine to throw on our state representatives during the abortion debacle, we would have locked them up. Show me your ID. Are you a Texan? Sorry, you won't come into the house where we do business for citizens of Texas. But no, it's a nationalized issue because we're dealing with it in Texas, and people in 4 other states didn't like it. They're going to all come down here and get involved in it. I firmly believe we can still make Texas a salt and light. I think we can set the example. I really think we can reestablish federalism. I think it has to do with the fact that everybody in this room didn't have a clue what I was talking about when I got here, and I think you get it now. No one does. We're not taught this in school. I got out of school, I had the basic premise everybody else did about the Constitution. Yeah, it's a document. Yeah, we had founders, we had framers. And George Washington was a guy that cut down a cherry tree. Lincoln was the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, the basic outline. It's not what we get in school. And I sit on Tarkington Independent School District, the local school board. They love me. Some of them. I ask everybody right now, make the decision to re-educate yourself. And it doesn't matter how old you are. I was 40 years old when I started. It's got to happen sometime, and share it with everybody you know. This is it's political. Only support candidates that understand this concept. Bring it up to them. Ask them directly. What's their opinion of the relationship between the state and the federal? Who has more power? Real basic questions. Yes, sir. Do you have a question? Oh, I thought you were wondering. These people do exist. I've met a few, and there'll be more of us. Trust me. Federalism is like the brightest light you ever had turned on. When you figure out federalism and the basic premise of the Constitution, the original design, it never goes off. You'll walk around and you'll hear somebody talking about a state doing X, Y, and Z, and you'll go, yeah, okay, whatever. And you'll hear about somebody griping about Texas, and you'll immediately start going, that's none of your business. I mean, it's simple. We shouldn't be getting all up in arms about what's going on around the country. If we're dealing with it here in Texas, that's what we need to take care of. If you can't find one of these people, be one of these people. You got me? Small businessman, didn't finish college, school board member, loved my community, steps out there and runs for U.S. Senate. What an idiot. Right? To anybody for anything, I want to be an example that you do not have to be part of the hierarchy of academia to be a member of government, to represent anybody. You do not have to be groomed, polished, selected. Establishment's a good word, but you do not have to be in that mold. If you have common sense, bring it. If you have something to offer, bring it. If your heart's in the right place, please bring it. Share what you know and stay vigilant. Everybody talks about Tea Parties doing that all the time, but get out and talk to everybody. Don't just talk to each other. We always spend up in choir practice together. We meet once a week and we drive and we go home. God bless Texas, keep Texas free. That's the first portion of this. If y'all are wore out, we'll break now. Y'all want to break for a minute? I've got about 15 minutes of this other one that's going to even upset you even more. Y'all want to stand up for a minute? What do you think?
Yeah, let's stand up.
What time is it?
Take a move.
Keep
Well,
going.
if y'all are sitting, we'll go with it. This is the only thing I could come up with on how to explain this portion. How we're managed and manipulated and why nothing we care about really matters. Got that Prozac handy? In politics, it's not just about following the money. Okay, everybody says follow the money, and that's very, very true. And a lot of this has to do with that, but the vast majority of it has to do with follow your money. If you're a contributor, if you give money to anybody, anywhere, you need to listen to this closely. Did anybody ever see this email? This came out in February. This is just before the primary. This is lately. Anybody ever heard of Mia Love?
Yeah.
Great candidate.
Yeah.
Great candidate from Utah. She's got it all. Conservative, mom, black, female. She's kicking tail in all demographics. This is Patriots for Economic Freedom. That is a PAC. This PAC sends out this mass email, right? Millions of people receive this email. All over the nation. The union, excuse me. When I say nation, I'm generally talking about Texas. Mia Love can be the next member of Congress. We must reach every single voter and let them know the importance. We must work to elect this dedicated patriot. Donate, 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 right? Patriots for Economic Freedom. This PAC didn't make any contributions to federal candidates in the 2014 election cycle. Now, what I'm going to give you, understand everything I'm going to tell you right now, except for one caveat, and I'll tell you that part when we get there. Everything I'm going to talk to you about is perfectly legal. This is how, if you ever want to read The Law by Frederick Bastiat, this is the law at work for legal plunder. This is one example of hundreds and hundreds of examples, okay? Total receipts in the period they submitted this filing was $136,000. They spent $139,000 during that period. Total contributions to federal candidates, $0. The individual who's the treasurer runs it is Tyler Whitney. I only say that name because all these names kind of come around in a circle. You'll notice that this is their expenditure submitted in that last submittal. Amagi Strategies got almost 80,000 of the 136 they took in. Tyler Whitney, who's the guy that runs the PAC, paid himself $12,500. DB Capital Strategies, there's a number of DB Capital Strategies on that. Tyler Whitney is Amagi Strategies. So out of the 136 that was taken in, somewhere around 100,000 of it went to Amagi Strategies, Tyler Whitney. That's the guy that has the PAC, right? And he's using Mia Love as a sales pitch. DB Capital Strategies. DB Capital is Dan Backer. Remember that name. I don't know why I write that down. I say that every time. DB Capital Strategies. That is this guy Dan Backer. This is a short list of PACs that he runs. TeaParty.net. Everybody in this room has gotten an email or a spam or a letter or something from TeaParty.net. You may have thrown it away, but I guarantee you've gotten it. It's one of the biggest ones in the country. They gave $2,500 to Steve Stockman and special candidates. Take a guess who the special candidates are. If I told you you were giving money to TeaParty.net, TeaParty.net was sending money to Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn, would you give money to TeaParty.net? Nope. No. Okay, well they did. Special Operations Speaks. Dan Backer has that one. Special Operations Speaks endorsed Steve Stockman, which was very strange because I spoke to 250 members of SOS in Fort Worth not 2 weeks before that happened. And their board members called me and said, we don't know what was going on. They did that out of Washington, D.C. We didn't have any say so in it. Now, very strange. All this, understand, I'm totally in the blind during all this. And I'm thinking, well, what is that all about? This Tomorrow's Meaningful PAC, more special candidates. TeaParty.net took in $3.8 million and gave $58,000 to candidates. Take a wild guess what the vast majority of the $58,000 went to. Who they went to? Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn. The DB Capital Strategies, he paid himself a cool $130,000, $31,000. They expended $40,000 to what's called the Defense of Freedom, Free Speech, JFC. JFC is short for Joint Fundraising Committee. Joint Fundraising Committees can be created by any PAC and numerous. You can create as many of them as you want. It can have all kinds of membership on them. What this is, and what I'm trying to explain to you as we go along, is that federal politics is about making money. It is not about getting elected. The horse in the race doesn't mean anything. You get letters in the mail that are totally tuned to your ideology. If you are a known Republican with this particular viewpoint at this address, you get an email that says, fight back against the homosexual agenda. Fight back against abortion, open abortion. Fight back against people who are taking your guns. And you get it in and you go, oh yeah. And you would not believe how many of us bite and give money monthly for years, sometimes decades. I keep going. Patriots for Economic Freedom, the Tyler Whitney. He's the controlling agent whose partner is Dan Backer. He's in on that one too. He's actually in on a slew of them. That's the first little example. Here's the secondary one. These are all related. Anybody got anything from the Public Advocate of the United States? Anybody heard the name Eugene Delgado? Oh yeah. I guarantee you've all gotten one. You should pay attention to it. It comes in a real formal package mailer. This is the general concept. What is John Cornyn hiding? Now, I think John Cornyn's an absolutely horrible, worst senator in my lifetime. That's a whole other story. Cornyn's campaign manager assured me that the senator was reviewing this survey. This has to do with a survey that's put forth by this public advocate. Says, we have also not received complete surveys from Senate candidates Dwayne Stovall and all and everybody else. On the other hand, Congressman Steve Stockman, candidate Kirk Cleaver, and another candidate, Chris Mapp, have all pledged 100% support. They go on through this, and they keep highlighting Steve Stockman. And then you end up with this, ask Senator Cornyn what they're hiding, and thank Congressman Stockman. Well, just so you know, this Eugene Delgado, he's nothing against county commissioners, but he's a county commissioner in a county in Virginia. He does this on the side. They have a huge donor list. They've been building for years and years and years with Steve. Huge donor list. And by the way, the donor lists have two points, two reasons. They want your money and they want you to expand their donor list. So you'll notice when you get these donate, forward to your most conservative friends. Forward to this, asking for your help. And people help. They have millions of people in these donor bases. I'm going to tell you, Adam named Donnie Ferguson. If you're writing anything down, write this down. There's a frontline video that if you go watch it, you'll get a clear understanding of where all this PACs, C4, Super PACs, Leadership PACs, where it all stems from. It's called Frontline, Big Sky, Big Money. How many in here have ever heard of the Citizens United case? Okay. Short story of that is Citizens United involved a 100-year-old law in Montana that said basically that corporations could not be involved in the election process in Montana. And a conservative, understand what I'm telling you, a conservative lawyer sued. And what spawned out of that lawsuit in Montana was the Citizens United case, and the rulings that came out of that is what created all of this wonderful corporations or people, super PACs, C4s, issue-oriented, nonprofit, leadership PACs, you name it. They created all of that. What we have today are C4s like this, or PACs, that are 1 degree away from a candidate. The way this works is candidates have to release who gives them money, right? You should be able to get online and see everybody's participating in that candidacy, right? But they can have a C4 that they're not supposed to be working with, who can take unlimited dollars from anybody, whether they're from Saudi Arabia, or whether they're down the street, or whether it's Coca-Cola, or whether it's Mr. and Ms. Smith. They can take unlimited numbers of dollars, and they can work on behalf of a candidate. And they can still be considered issue-oriented C4 nonprofits as long as they don't use 8 words in their advertising. It's literally 8 words. Now, I could show you a commercial, and I don't have it with me, but I could show you a commercial by a C4 that's still an issue-oriented nonprofit that's not supposed to be politically involved. And when you see them get bashing a candidate, you'll swear up and down it was written by the guy that's running against them. I mean, they avoid those 8 words, but they bash him to death. Well, in Montana, this guy was involved with a PAC, Western Pacific PAC or something of that nature. It's in that Frontline documentary. He had a judgment put against him for, I forget how many dollars, for manipulating voters, because what they do is they send out those surveys. You know, the survey that he's referencing, they didn't fill out our survey. Well, they have to hide. They don't have family values. They send out these surveys. By the way, these surveys have the most crazy questions on them you've ever seen. You get it and you go, I'm not answering that. And you throw it in the trash. Then they say, we didn't get it. And then they write up their little article and they say, these candidates we've received these, but Steve Stockman had the best answers ever. He has the most family-oriented values, right? And they send it back out to hundreds of thousands of people. And they try to sway votes that way. This guy was popped. Well, he and Eugene Delgadio worked together for many years. If you pull up Google Delgadio and Ferguson, you're going to get money laundering issues that they have. Now, this is Public Advocate of the United States. This is that Eugene Delgadio guy, the commissioner out there in Virginia. They raised $1.1 million. This is in 2011, the last filing we can get access to. They showed no payments to any employees, but they showed the mailers and the distribution for all the fundraising. They paid out in the top row. But amazingly, this Eugene Delgadio and Associates got paid $133,000 out of it. That's paying yourself with donor money, and it's all, you know, it's nonprofit, just money. But there's no money going to candidates. That's the crazy part. It's kind of like TeaParty.net. They get $3.8 million, and they get $58,000 to candidates. People you wouldn't give if you're a Tea Party member. Center for the American Future. Bear with me, it's the last one on time altogether. This is run by Jason Posey. They host or put out what's called the Conservative News. I don't know if anybody got that in their mail, but it's a mailer, it comes out like a publication, Conservative News, and you read the articles in it. Every other article has Congressman Stockman highlighted. He's the guy, whatever. That's what you have. You get this. This is their breakdown of Congressman Stockman versus Cornyn. Stockman for Senate, it's inside, it's a flyer inside the Conservative News publication. This is what you have. Dan Backer is Steve Stockman's campaign treasurer. Donnie Ferguson is his campaign manager and media advisor. And Jason Posey is his old treasurer who broke off to start this C4 nonprofit. Now the tie into all of this is this. Investigative journalists had a resource in New Jersey who was going through WordPress. Everybody understands WordPress is a host site for, you can put any website you want up there. He went to their index pages. If you know anything about websites, you understand if you go to publicly accessed website pages, you can see everything that's listed on, all the pages that are on a website. On WordPress, it's pretty easy. They found completely unsecured, open to the public, pages on that website that were documented donations to the Steve Stockman for Senate campaign in 2014. Okay, that in and of itself is against the law in our viewpoint. If he's collecting donations through a C4 nonprofit that's not supposed to affiliate with the candidates, that was a problem. The secondary problem is that when I say it was unprotected, publicly accessed information on the donors, it was their names, their home addresses, their credit card information, how much they gave. It was worse than if somebody walked into your bank and took your information straight out of the vault. So we submitted all of that to the FEC with 2 complaints. They're working on that now. Mr. Stockman may be a defendant within the next 30 days or so. But if you wondered where he was at the entire campaign and why he never showed up anywhere, it's because he didn't think he had to. Either that or I don't know what the deal was. We never saw him anywhere. I was at 3 different functions where he was supposed to be and he never showed at any of them. That being said, the issue is this. This is going on everywhere. This is one example of one campaign. And the way this works, and I'm going to add this, boy, I'm just going to pile it on you. C4s, all the nonprofit status that have to do with the Citizens United, all the PACs, super PACs, leadership PACs. Leadership PACs are the ones you got to watch out for the worst. They're all terrible. I'm a firm believer that money is free speech, by the way. I think if you earned your money and you want to go spend it to support somebody, you spend $1 billion. I don't care. But in government, this is not a corporate situation. This is my viewpoint, by the way. If you disagree, that's fine. This is government. And as the framers of the Constitution argued about, if you have a government that is not transparent and it works behind and covertly outside the will of the people, you're not having a republic. You're being managed, and it's not a free situation. So my situation is this, my viewpoint is this. If you want to run for office in a government that is supposed to be working transparent, and we're supposed to be a portion of this, governed by those that are governed, right? Governance by those that are governed, then you better show the exact same example while you campaign. Don't have all the money that's coming into you be hidden because I don't need to know where it comes from. I want to know if you have $1 million donation from X, because I'm a free market guy, and I know for a fact that there is a cutoff somewhere in the dollars where the public will be turned off. It might be $1 million, it might be $10 million, it might be $500,000, but you can take donations from people and they can write you a fat check and people will be, they gave him $50,000. Well, you know, you got a lot of money, give him $50,000. You get that one donor that comes up there and hands somebody $20 million, you're going to go, what does he owe him? Her. What's the relationship there? There comes a moment where the tips the scales and voters are not going to go for that individual because of the money. And I think everybody in this room understands you would rather vote for somebody who's got 1 million people giving $10 a piece to a candidate than one candidate who's got $10 million coming from a single individual. So, for me, corporations do not vote. But these PACs that spawned out of this, where they said corporations are people and this is where we're going to recognize them and it's free speech and all that, leadership PACs are insidious. Who writes the rules for PACs? Congress. Who can have a leadership PAC? Members of Congress. What are the special rules? And I call these special. These are super special. Leadership PACs have rules that say any excess funds in your leadership PAC can follow you out of office.
Whoa.
So, and I'm going to speak a little harshly. I'll still smile through it, but I'll speak a little harshly. You're telling me that a member of Congress is going to use the law to steal from Texans to pay themselves $176,000 a year for public service. At the same time, they're going to steal and legally plunder from Texans, many of which can't afford to have a savings or a retirement, to create a pension plan that's unheard of. And all at the same time, they're going to have a leadership PAC where they can shuffle money around through these joint fundraising committees and get them into that leadership. And they can create a secondary pension they can carry with them when they leave office. Because they're very minimal, broad scope rules of how you have to use it when you leave office. Most of them use it to employ family members to stay in contact with their constituents that kept them in office. It's not pretty. This is all about making money. And it's all about playing on our ideals. It's playing on our ideals. And this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. You were talking about earlier, the Democrats are playing this dollar thing, you know. It's just as bad on the Republican side. When you get inside the Beltway, it all turns green. It all turns green. The Democrats play the liberal cards on their constituency, and the Republicans play the hardcore conservative causes on their constituency, and they all rob us through the politics. So, what I get into about this is what we've learned and what I have learned. And what I learned was this: I will never give one penny to an organization outside the state of Texas again. And I don't care who they are. You got something you trust, you give it to them. Whatever your heart lays on your heart, you give it to them. I'm telling you, my personal experience through all this, I'll never give a dime to anybody outside the state of Texas. My second rule is, if I can't walk in the front door and shake hands with the individual that's handling the money that I am giving, they don't get it. If I can't see them and see the results, they don't get it. Most importantly, if you have a candidate you like and you want to support them, give it right to that candidate. Don't ever listen to a single letter that comes through the papers, through the mailbox, saying that we're raising money for this candidate, we're going to give to conservative candidates. Forget that. They're lying through their teeth. Give it directly to that candidate. And if you can't find a group in your county, I'm really big on local. If you can't find a group in your county to donate money to, or somebody that you trust enough that you want to give it to your church. Find a charity. Do something else. So it's insidious, but nobody knows anything about it. Good Lord, I didn't know anything about all this until they started dumping all this on me the last 2 months of the campaign. And I was like, well, no wonder I can only raise $70,000. You know, no wonder these people are raising money and you never see them. They go to a fundraiser and they raise $5,000, and I'm going, wow, they raised $5,000. Yeah, but they actually are getting $6 million in one cycle. Where's that money coming from? It's not coming from us. It's coming from outside the state of Texas. It's coming from influential groups that fund these PACs. So, what's the old adage? Money is the root of all evil? It absolutely, or the want of money. Now, there's one other thing I want to explain to y'all, and this was kind of an epiphany for me, and it has to do with nationalism. We live in a world that's a left-right paradigm. We live in a country. We have the left, the right, we have the far left, we have our far-right extremists like us. We have this whole setup. This is not a debate, okay? We are not arguing with the left to convince them that the conservative values we hold are the right way to go. This is not an argument. We're not going to convince them to come to our side. And they're not going to convince us that the collective measures and taxing ourselves into oblivion to try and take care of people who won't work is the way to go. They're never going to get that. Nationalism has gotten us to this point. The lack of federalism has gotten us to this point. Everybody understands that the Bible says that ye shall not be unequally yoked to non-believers. Well, let me tell you something. That's a two-way street. And nationalism forces us to be yoked to non-believers. And it forces them to be yoked to us. It forces us to have to assemble together with people we normally wouldn't assemble with. It doesn't allow us to assemble in states that are more aligned with our viewpoints. It forces us to all live by one abode. And the issue for me is this left-right paradigm we have. If we live by federalism, that would go away. Because today, we're not having our argument over ideals. What we're really battling over is we want to get as many of our guys into that national office so we can take the gun that is the federal government and force the other guys to live according to our demands. That's not the point. That's what we fight over today, but that's not what we're supposed to be doing. Federal government is not supposed to be the hammer that drives home whoever's in power at the national level on 50 states. As long as everybody understands that, we're going to have the way to go forward. Not in the Obama way, by the way. But what we have today is ESPN for politics. You wake up with it, you go to bed with it. We know more about our pundits that are talking on TV. We see more of them than we see of our spouses half the time. You live by federalism, you don't have that 24-hour news cycle because it goes away. We don't have an issue with having national power. So I want everybody to take this concept and kind of chew on it for a few days. I have a website. Believe it or not, the guy that owns Keep Texas Free called me today, and he wants to help out. I've got a website called Keep My State Free. It's on the card. It's actually under construction, but we may be upgrading that to go to Keep Texas Free. Keep My State Free is a broad, all-inclusive website that we're going to allow Keep Oklahoma Free as a group that's going to get together and keep Louisiana free. People who are going to push federalism really hard, and we're going to allow this all to assemble on one website. But if I get Keep Texas Free up, it'll be ours to ourselves. I said earlier, this is not free for me. Anybody who wants to help out, I would certainly appreciate it. And this is, and by the way, it's like buying advertising. This is not given to a candidate. If you have a business and you write a check, you're going to get an invoice in the mail saying you bought advertising for this, and you take it off on your taxes. Because that's what you're doing. You're sponsoring these events as I go around during the year. But I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to everybody. I hope I didn't depress everybody too much. I really think Texas can get it together. I just think we've got to kind of get on the same stride and understand that these arguments that we're trying to have on a bigger scale need to happen here. They don't need to happen 316 million wide. We've got enough of us here in Texas to create enough battles. But thank y'all very much for having me here.